Welcome to the Planet MicroCap Showcase. I'd like to introduce our next presenter for the event. It is Ted Karkus, the chairman and CEO of ProPhase Labs. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is PRPH on Nasdaq. And with that, Ted, take it away.
Thanks so much for having me, Robert. I'm really excited to present at the Planet MicroCap Showcase. I have a lot of information to share with you. Normally, I do about a 25-30-minute presentation. I do a 30-minute Q&A. We don't have the Q&A. I'm going to try and anticipate some of the questions that you would ask and try and put them in. If at the end of the presentation you want more information, go to our website. Stock symbol is PRPH, where you can, get in touch with our company and learn more. In any event, I'm so proud. You're actually looking at our building right now in Garden City, New York, where we have our headquarters and where we have our COVID testing lab, our clinical lab. It's a 25,000 square foot lab with state-of-the-art equipment. I'll be talking more about that. But before I get into anything, forward-looking statement, I'm not going to read the forward-looking statement, but I'm going to assume that you have read it. It is also on our website. It's in all our presentations. I do have a complete presentation on our website as well. In any event, I'm going to be talking about numbers in the future, things we're planning in the future. There's no guarantee, of course, that those things will happen. However, I can tell you that anything that I say today, I believe in my heart is true and accurate as of today. Okay? And with that, I'm going to be just big picture. Our company is really comprised of 4 key divisions. As I mentioned, ProPhase Diagnostics, we're going to talk a lot about that. That's our clinical lab testing. Nebula Genomics is a very exciting business that we acquired last year. That's really the future of our company. Right now, ProPhase Diagnostics is the most significant portion of our revenues. Nebula, I believe, ultimately could be more valuable than the entire company. And then 2 divisions I'm not going to talk about as much. These are our historic businesses. We have a contract manufacturing business. We historically owned the Cold-EEZE Cold Remedy brand. We ultimately sold the brand, but we still manufacture Cold-EEZE lozenges, and we also manufacture for about 8 other companies on a contract manufacturing basis. This business is growing and doing quite well. And then TK Supplements, our line of dietary supplements. When we sold the Cold-EEZE brand, we wanted to keep our distribution and our infrastructure in 40,000 food, drug, and mass retail stores. So we built this other line of products that's doing quite well. It's growing, albeit from a small base. Our TK Supplements, our lead product is Legends XL. A few years ago, it was probably doing $1 million a year. Then it grew to $1.5 million. Then last year, probably did $2.5 million. This year, we'll do like $3.5 million. Our contract manufacturing, was doing about $8 or $9 million last year. This year, could do 12 million, 13 million revenues. So these are nice growing businesses, but, maybe they represent, 15 or 20% of our overall company. And with that, I just want to go into a little bit of timeline. I think the most important thing, look, my background is on Wall Street. And the one thing I learned, and I've been investing in small cap development stage companies for literally for 40 years. And the one thing I learned is that every company I ever got excited about that I ever invested in, the management, they were always optimistic. They always had a great story to tell. They either had a great product or a great service. But at the end of the day, 95% of the time, they didn't execute. And that's why I think it's so important to invest, particularly in microcaps, to invest in a company that can execute. Microcap stocks have been in a bear market for probably 14 months, probably since January of 2020. So maybe even more than 14 months now. And so back then it was easy to raise capital, stock prices were going up, but look at the execution of most of those companies over the last year to year and a half. Now they can't raise capital. If they've burned through the capital that they have and they're losing money, they're in big trouble. And so you see these companies whose stock prices, go from 30 to 5, from 15 to 1. I see a number of them go from $6 to 50 cents or 40 cents. The reason why our stock is held up strong is we actually have more capital now than the capital that I raised in January of 2020. And so with that, just by way of history, just a couple of minutes of history, and then we'll get into our current businesses. I guess you could call me an activist shareholder. I turned around a company called ID Biomedical. You can go on my LinkedIn profile if you want to learn more about that. I was one of the largest shareholders, as were my friends. I forced out the CEO, promoted 2 guys underneath them, did 2 financings for them, put the company in a new direction. This was a company that was potentially going bankrupt, and ultimately it was sold to GlaxoSmithKline for $1.4 billion. With that experience, along came a company, our company, ProPhase Labs. I initiated a proxy contest. I won control of the company. After winning control, I had to write off most of the businesses. What I thought were exciting businesses turned out not to have much value. And the one asset that was really left in the company was cold ease. And so I turned around the company, had to fire virtually everybody, start from scratch, turned around the cold ease brand, which had declining sales for 4 or 5 years. And ultimately I sold that brand for $50 million in 2017. I didn't squander the cash. I always wanted to build a multi-billion-dollar company, but you can't just snap your fingers. And so while I was looking for that great new opportunity, we did keep the manufacturing facility. We did keep our infrastructure for selling into 40,000 food, drug, and mass retail stores. And in the meantime, we paid out dividends to shareholders and we bought back stock. And so since our stock bottomed at 65 cents in 2012, and most of the shareholders in our company are long-term shareholders, they've been very well rewarded. We paid out $2.10 in dividends, and our stock trades around $7. So our stock's up more than 10 times, and we paid more than 3 times the value of our stock in dividends since that time. And you may say, oh, I wish I'd been an investor in 2012 or 2015. The fact of the matter is I'm more excited about what I'm working on now. The potential is greater for what we're doing now than what I was working on from 2012 until now. So we paid out the dividends. In the fourth quarter 2020, along came that first opportunity that I was looking for, where we could do something substantive. And that was in response to COVID. And so I told everyone we were going to buy a lab, a CLIA testing lab. And literally within about 6 to 8 weeks, we bought a lab, set it up for testing. And the third week of December of 2020, we started testing. And the very first quarter of 2021, we just blew it out of the water. We did an enormous amount of testing. We outperformed, literally in our first quarter in the business, we outperformed about 95% of the labs in the country. And that was with, we started off with a small lab in New Jersey that we bought that had no customers. We built a customer base from scratch. And we were so successful, as I said, Think Equity raised $37.5 million for us in January of 2020. And then throughout 2021, we had a fantastic year. And again, this is just a history of strong execution. In our very first quarter, we did $12 million in lab revenues on 110,000 COVID tests. So that's just a little bit about our history. I'm going to get back to the timeline and show you how far we've come from the first quarter of 2021 to the first quarter of 2022. And with that, let's just talk about the diagnostic testing business a little bit. So we built out this fantastic lab in Garden City, New York, 25,000 square feet, state-of-the-art equipment. And the beauty of our lab is that because it's a new lab and we did it the right way and we had the right capital, we bought all of the latest state-of-the-art equipment. We are one of the most efficient labs in the country. In addition to that, I hired a fantastic chief information officer who built out a proprietary platform, IT platform. It's critically important. Once you have a lab that processes the tests and can do a good job of that, we have a great job of processing tests in our lab. The most critically important part to being viewed as a fantastic lab to your customers is if you have a patient portal. It's an IT portal for collecting patient information and then reporting results. We have a state-of-the-art IT platform, in addition to which I hired mid-year a fantastic COO for our lab operation business and made our lab significantly more efficient, faster turnaround times. We're really the darlings of the industry in terms of turning around results. And I'm talking about the gold standard PCR COVID testing. We also do antigen testing, antibody testing, and just a little bit more on our lab. Just to put this in perspective, a year ago, January 2020, no one had been vaccinated. We had a spike, due to Delta. Did a ton of business. As I said, we did 110,000 tests in our first quarter in the business. And I told everybody a year ago, and I'm telling everybody now, vaccines, they've never stopped flu year after year after year. They don't stop you from getting the flu. What they hopefully do is reduce the symptoms if you get the flu. And it's the same thing with COVID. So everybody in the country got vaccinated, 60, 70% of the population got vaccinated. And this time around in December, January, we had a new wave of COVID. This time it was Omicron. And this wave was worse than the first wave. And this was after everyone got vaccinated. So to think that vaccinations are going to stop COVID, it simply doesn't. What it hopefully does is it reduces symptoms. But in the meantime, even if you get COVID and you have less symptoms, you still need to get tested. You don't want to give COVID to other people. You want to get tested. And if it finds out that you're positive, obviously you want to get quarantined as soon as possible. And so the key is, as we go through these waves of COVID, and now there's another wave of COVID, it's called BA2. It's shutting down China. It's been horrendous in the UK, and now it's starting to ramp up in the United States. Nobody has really been talking about it. Maybe in the last week or two, I've been talking about it for about a month, because the incidence of Omicron was dropping so fast that nobody has been paying attention to BA2. But now that Omicron dropped, or positivity rates dropped under 1%, BA2 has reared its ugly head. It's starting to ramp up. We're over 3%, 4% positivity rates and growing, and it's becoming a real issue. And the bottom line is we continue to go through waves of COVID. And when you go through waves of COVID, you need testing. And unlike a year ago, where we only had 2 or 3 major customers, we now have 2 or 3 dozen major specimen collection partners. These specimen collection partners, these aren't the actual patients. These are companies that we work with that go out and collect specimens in various places. So we have 1 company, 2 companies that test the schools, that test 80, 100, 120 schools. We have another company that tests independent pharmacies, that collects tests through the independent pharmacies, that have signed up about 150 or 200 independent pharmacies. We have 2 or 3 other companies who do testing in New York City, tents on the street. If you're ever in New York City, you walk out the door and you see a tent on 42nd Street, 23rd Street, wherever it's densely populated, and it's densely populated really throughout New York City. You'll see a tent for COVID testing. Chances are those tests are coming to our lab because we have several partners we're working with. So we have all these different partners. And so even when we go through the waves, unlike last year, this year, even as Omicron dropped, our testing levels have been up dramatically year over year. So I stated late last year and again early this year that we expect for the next 4 reported quarters that our numbers are going to be up year over year. We just had a blowout, fantastic fourth quarter of 2021. I've stated publicly that our first quarter of 2022 is also going to be fantastic. And what's interesting, even in the second quarter, we're still doing significant testing volume versus a year ago. And it's at a high enough level where we're very profitable. And the reason for that is because we have so many different customers testing in so many locations and locales. And so even as COVID will go through waves up and down, even in the down cycles of those waves, we're still doing a significant amount of testing. The last thing I'll say is we're just not all about COVID testing. We plan to expand into all of your traditional types of clinical testing, which could include urine and toxicology and pathology and so forth, so that even if COVID goes away over the next year or 2 or 3, we will be a diverse laboratory business that does all of your traditional types of testing that occurred long before COVID hit us. Having said that, COVID isn't all of a sudden magically going to disappear. It's going to go through the waves the same way that we're going through a wave of BA2 right now. All right, so let's get back to the timeline a little bit. Now that I talked a little about our COVID testing business, how we're going to diversify and be a fully diversified lab. So for those of you who think we're just a COVID testing company, we're so much more for a number of reasons. But even within the diagnostics business, we expect the second half of this year to be a fully diversified lab business. So again, Q1 2021, we had our 12 million in revenues, 110,000 COVID tests. Q2 of last year, we paid another 30-cent special dividend to shareholders, approximately $4.5 million. Then in the third quarter, we're going to get into this. We acquired Nebula Genomics. I am so excited. Again, I think that Nebula Genomics could be worth more than the entire market cap of our company in the next year or 2. And then fourth quarter, we just reported blowout results. So just to put this in perspective, we had blowout numbers in the first quarter where we did 110,000 COVID tests. In the fourth quarter, we did 350,000 COVID tests. We generated revenues just in the fourth quarter, $45.2 million. $79 million for the entire year. And just to put that in perspective, our net working capital, I don't remember exactly what it is as of year end, but it's around $40–50 million. And then we have a state-of-the-art lozenge manufacturing facility on 12 acres that we own across the street from a Walmart. It's valuable property. We're doing 10–12 million in that business and growing. So that's a significant asset. We have our dietary supplement business, which is now profitable and growing. We have our Nebula genomics business I'm going to get into in a moment. And then we have this fantastic lab, and we just generated 79 million in revenues for the full year last year. We had net income of 6.3 million. That included, we had losses in the second and third quarter, but on an adjusted EBITDA base, we actually made money in the first 3 quarters. And when you add the fourth quarter on an adjusted EBITDA basis, we generate $18.1 million in adjusted EBITDA. That's based on 15.5 million shares. So that's more than $1 per share. Our stock's only trading at around $7. To put that in perspective, compared to all the microcaps that are losing money, we're making money. And so my point, and I started to say this earlier, my point was that we raised $37.5 million from Think Equity. Since that time, we paid out $9 million. We just paid another, in the first quarter of this year, we just paid another 30-cent dividend, it's another $4.5 million. So we've done $9 million worth of special dividends. We acquired Nebula Genomics for $14.5 million, and yet we still have significantly more working capital now than the capital that we raised a year ago. That's a management that executes. So we had fantastic full year numbers. The outlook, Q1 2022, as I mentioned, we announced and paid another 30-cent special dividend last month, and we expect record results the same way we did in Q4 of 2021. We expect record results again, certainly year over year in the first quarter of 2022. All right, let's talk about Nebula Genomics. As I said, I'm really excited about the future. So ProPhase Precision Medicine is today where the internet was 20 years ago. We're in the first inning with precision medicine. What does that mean? It's analyzing your genetic makeup and based on that, determining a healthier lifestyle. And at the same time, if God forbid you get a disease or you get an illness, it's determining the best drug or therapy based on your genetic makeup. So to give you an example, and I'll go to the next slide. We have a proprietary library where when you get whole genome sequence, and whole genome sequencing, that's at the base of your genetic makeup in a precision medicine. It all starts with a genetic test. And unlike the big companies out there, Ancestry.com and 23andMe, they only study a very small percentage of your DNA. Whereas with whole genome sequencing, we're studying your entire DNA. In fact, we're sequencing it 30 times over. It's called 30x. Okay. The amount of information you get from whole genome sequencing, 30x whole genome sequencing, is literally like 1,000 to 5,000 times as much as the information you get from these other large companies that are studying a small amount of your DNA. So when you're talking about ancestry information, studying a small part of your DNA is all you really need. So that's great for them. And the reason why they only study a small percentage of your DNA is because historically whole genome sequencing was so expensive. In fact, originally it was $100 million for whole genome sequencing. It got all the way down to about $1,000 in recent years, but that's too expensive for the average person that wants to know about their ancestry. So they only studied a very small percentage of your genome. We come on now, we provide whole genome sequencing for your health. We think that this is an entirely new business proposition. I don't think 90% of the country has ever even heard of whole genome sequencing. We want to get it out to the masses. So Nebula Genomics, the company that we acquired, they sell online. They had a fantastic relationship with some companies abroad, so they could be the low-cost provider of whole genome sequencing. We're looking through developing partnerships and relationships. We believe we're going to be able to get the price down further. There's tremendous price elasticity of demand to whole genome sequencing. When we did a test recently and dropped the price just on a test, the sales went up like 10 times. So we know if we can get the price down permanently, we're going to drive sales. And we have an interesting business model. We sell whole genome sequencing at cost, but in exchange for that, We also sell a subscription to our library. Our library, we believe, is proprietary. We don't believe anybody else in the world has a library like ours. What that library does is it provides you with key information about your genetic makeup. So when you get whole genome sequence and you learn about diseases you're predisposed to, we provide you with a polygenic risk score. So for instance, the example on this slide, this person's in the 41st percentile for colorectal cancer. Now, let's suppose your whole genome sequenced and you're in the 80th or 90th percentile for colorectal cancer. You may not want to wait. The insurance company suggests that you wait until you're 50 years old to get a colonoscopy. But if you're in the 80th or 90th percentile for colorectal cancer, guess what? You might want to get your first colonoscopy when you're 40 or 35. So, or let's suppose you're predisposed to lung cancer. You might want to think twice when you're a teenager in your 20s and you're smoking a cigarette, if you know you, based on your genetic makeup, you're predisposed to lung cancer. And then let's take it a step further. Let's suppose you get an illness or a disease. Let's suppose you get a cancer. Suppose two women get breast cancer. And in the future, with ongoing research, what if we're going to be able to learn that based on your genetic makeup, the first woman that gets breast cancer is a perfect candidate for chemotherapy. Whereas the second candidate, it turns out based on her genetic makeup, it turns out chemotherapy isn't going to work for her at all, but there are other drugs or therapies or treatments that have a high degree of success. You obviously would want to know that before you did 6 months of chemotherapy just to find out it wasn't going to work for you. This is the future of medicine. This is why it's called personalized precision medicine. It's based on your own personalized genetic makeup for you to get the best healthcare, for you to live the healthiest lifestyle, and if or when you get diseases, to know what the best form of treatment or drugs are that are on the market. There's ongoing research. Our library is updated weekly, if not daily. We are scouring the world for ongoing clinical research and constantly updating our library. Nobody has a library like ours. There are other companies, and in fact, there are other countries that are really interested in that library. We think we're going to be able to leverage the library. So right now, we're just selling whole genome sequencing online. But as I mentioned, we have our whole infrastructure in place through our dietary supplement business. So our goal is to also offer a low-cost whole genome sequencing product that we sell in stores to consumers at Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, Rite Aid. We're working on that initiative now. So we want to leverage our food, drug, and mass retail distribution. And then finally, we have a laboratory that's doing all this laboratory processing. We want to diversify our lab to do your traditional clinical testing, but then ultimately we also want to do the sequencing, the whole genome sequencing and the genetic testing in our lab, and we're looking to leverage our lab. So there are tremendous synergies between our businesses and all have tremendous potential. Already mentioned our dietary supplement business. I'm not going to go into more detail, but I will tell you that it is growing, that each year we get more distribution and more stores. We're now fully distributed in Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, Walmart, and all the other major food, drug, and mass retail stores. So it's virtually a guarantee for growth for this year over last year. Again, we have the state-of-the-art lozenge manufacturing facility, which is growing this year. I don't have time to explain why, except that because of COVID, there was a tremendous buildup of inventory. Everybody bought lozenges in 2020, and then they built up inventory. And because of that inventory, we had to burn through that in 2021. So there's actually a drop in 2021. Now in 2022, we're rebuilding inventory. We're selling more product than ever. And in 2022, we expect significant growth in our lozenge manufacturing business. Executive management team, I will just mention to you that we hired Sam Beeler recently as our Chief Strategy Officer of ProPhase Precision Medicine. He has relationships with large companies. He has a relationship with a $10 billion company in another country where we are working on potential strategic partnerships for Nebula Genomics in our ProPhase Precision Medicine. I would also mention that George Church is a PhD researcher and professor at Harvard. He is one of the leaders in the world on genomics over the last 20 years. He's also a founder, one of the founders of Nebula Genomics. When we acquired Nebula, he had a choice of taking cash or stock. He chose to take stock valued at $7 and change rather than taking cash. And he rarely does this. He agreed to be on our advisory board. In fact, we just had a call with him yesterday, and he's helping attract other key opinion leaders and people who would be great on our advisory board, while also bringing us other companies that are in the early stages that could merge with Nebula so that we can truly become a precision medicine company. Again, this is in the first inning. This is like the internet 20 years ago. And here you have a management team that has a history of executing. We have tremendous capital. We don't need to raise capital. We did a buyback last year. We paid 2 30-cent dividends over the last year. I just anticipate a couple of questions. People have asked, would I do another dividend? We expect to have a very strong first quarter. And I am also the largest shareholder. So I'm also a beneficiary when we do these dividends. I like to do what's best for the shareholders. I'm looking to grow the company. There isn't anything that we're working on right now that's going to require all the capital that we have, and we're profitable and growing. So there's no reason why I might not initiate another dividend, although I'm not going to guarantee it. I'm not going to announce it on this call, but these are the types of questions that I've been asked. And with that said, I pretty much covered the highlights, the investment highlights of our company. We only have 15.5 million shares outstanding. We did 79 million in revenues last year. We're going to have a fantastic first quarter. We're growing quickly. We have enormous working capital. And so the outlook is bright. You can see our history of special dividends, $2.10 in special dividends over the last several years. Most recently, we just did one middle of last year, and we just did one last month. And we expect a strong first quarter. So who knows, maybe we'll do another one. And I went over the whole corporate overview. And finally, if you have any further questions, obviously you can go to our website, prophaselabs.com. For institutional investors, you can go to investorrelations@prophaselabs.com. For retail investors, we also have Renmark Financial Communications, where I do non-deal roadshows with them. And with that, I'd really just like to wrap up and say thank you again to Planet MicroCap Showcase. Really appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate all of you taking the time to listen to me today. I really am enthusiastic about our company. And again, I'll just mention, I personally have a history of executing, and our company has had a history of executing over the last 8 to 10 years. And what I am working on right now, what we are working on right now, I am so optimistic. I believe that over the next year or two, we're going to accomplish significantly more than what we've already accomplished. So stay tuned, and I wish you all the best of luck. And thank you again.